What is up, guys? This is your boy Zilla, and welcome to today's episode of UFC Zilla, where I'll be covering UFC Fight Night, Dustin Poirer versus Dan Hooker, one of the prime matchups coming out of the lightweight division. And before I do that, please hit that subscribe button, also the notification bell, so you get notified every time I make a video. And guys, let's get into this because this is a prime time matchup. I mean, these guys could face Tony Ferguson, which I really suspect is what's going to happen. One of these two are going to fight Tony, and whoever beats Tony or loses to Tony, well, let's just say in case they beat them, will probably face maybe Conor, Khabib, or Justin Gaethje, one of the three big-headed monsters of this division. And this is such a pivotal fight. It's going to be very close, and it's going to really put Dan Hooker to the test to see if he is a top 5 elite fighter. But guys, let's go ahead and get into the fighter goals. What does each of these fighters need to do to win this hard matchup? And we're going to start with the challenger, Dan Hooker. What does he need to do to win this fight, to get in the top 5 and start facing the elite of the elite in the toughest division in the UFC? First, I think he's got to get the long range hands going. That's one thing he did right in the Paul Felder fight. And this fight is only going to be a tougher version of Paul Felder against a fighter who got a title shot earlier last year. This guy is proven to be championship worthy. So just to break it down, Dan Hooker had an amazing 2 first rounds against Paul Felder, but kind of let his foot off the gas and almost got knocked out in the fight. He managed to prevail in a very close split decision. And I think this fight, he's gonna have to be more crisp. He's gonna have to come out even more hot, because if he doesn't do the exact same thing that he did to Paul Felder, it can work out even worse, because we know that Dustin Poirer is a finisher. He finishes his fights. He finished Gaethje. Even though Gaethje was tearing his legs apart, I think Dan Hooker has to implement a dual game plan in really sticking away. He's going to have to really work on his head movement, stick away from the punches, attack Dustin Poirier's face, start blurring his vision so he cannot hit those punches, because once you take that accuracy away from Dustin Poirier, I think his game is going to start to fade a little bit. Plus, combine that with really hard leg kicks, and you have a dual plan that he can start outlasting him and dragging him down as the fight goes on, properly taking him out. Whereas in the Paul Felder fight, he let him recover and almost had him beat him in that fight, because he didn't really stick to his game plan and adjust as the fight went on, which is another thing he has to do. He has to adjust to Poirier's adjustments, and if he can do that, he can minimize the damage that Poirier does with his punches, and constantly have him in this puzzle, constantly trying to figure out how to properly counter him and hit him with punches. If he can stay ahead of him in that way in this fight, he will win and become one of the most elite fighters in the world in the toughest division. But now let's go to the proven former interim lightweight champion, Dustin Poirer, the man that got a title shot against Khabib, failed, but is now trying to come back strong and get that second title shot and beat all these killers to get back there. Dustin Poirer is one of the most elite strikers in the UFC. His striking is on the level with Conor, with those high level guys, and his toughness is second to none, standing and banging with Justin Gaethje, surviving his legendary leg kicks. And we all know how tough he is and how much he puts it on his opponents. And to go into this fight, it's do or die for Dustin Poirer. If he does not win this fight, he's kicked out of the top 5, being replaced by Dan Hooker. And what does he need to do to win this fight to assure that he stays in the range of getting another title shot? And that is, he has to hit his shots early. He has to have a hot start, take away his range with good head movement, use your good fundamentals that we know Dustin Poirer has. If he can start off hot and start off the way that Paul Felder finished, there is no way that Dan Hooker's winning this fight, because not only does Dustin have the good fundamentals, he has the good head movement, he has the good counter punches, and he is tough as nails. And if he can turn this fight into a brawl, Dan Hooker will not survive outside of 3 rounds. It just won't happen. We've proven when times get tough, he folds and he goes to the only strategy that's viable to him, stick and dodge range. And when he gets in that desperate position and starts getting hit, he is very vulnerable. And a lot of times, if that had not been Paul Felder in that fight, it had been Dustin Poirier, I think he would have finished him in 2 rounds in that specific fight, the way his condition was going. And that's the difference, where Paul Felder could not finish him because he took so much damage at first. Poirier would have not taken that much damage in that specific fight, and based on what he's done in the past, he would have ducked and moved and really messed up Dan Hooker and just finished him, which is what Paul Felder failed to do, which cost him that fight. So now looking into some of the scenarios, what can we expect from this fight? And I'm just going to bring in the hypothetical for Dan Hooker, because Dan Hooker has a very good chance to just make a maze for Dustin Poirier out of this fight, confusing him, constantly staying out of range, using his good footwork and head movement to stay out of the range of Dustin Poirier. I think if he does that, it changes the complexion of this fight, because now it goes from a brawl fight to can you hit me since I'm the longer fighter. And if he does that, annoys him and has a slicker style, I think that's a perfect counter for Dustin Poirier, who's a rugged brawler who likes to use his toughness and his will against opponents. And that's going to be real tough to counter that against somebody who's just going to stick and move, and win by decision. So I think if that happens in the first round, right, if they bring these 2 conflicting styles in the first round, I think that Dan Hooker is going to take that round, because it's going to take some time for Dustin Poirier to adjust his style to start trying to fight Dan Hooker in that way, going from a brawler to a disciplined style to try and knock him out of it and try to get in position to brawl. And I think we're going to see that in the second round, whereas in the first round it's just going to be a feeling out thing, where I usually give it to the person who has the length and is going to touch him up more so than the shorter guy. Then in that second or third round, we're going to see just a totally different fight. Dustin's going to start hitting his punches, and we're going to see how Dan Hooker reacts to it and how he's able to counteract it, because, well, like I said, the adjustment is what we're looking for out of Dan Hooker. Can he adjust to the opponent's adjustment of him? And if he can't, he's going to get knocked out. That's point blank period. If he gets in the same position that he did in that last fight, where he was getting hit like that, Dustin will finish him. He's made a career out of finishing guys like that. So he cannot get in that compromised position against a killer like Dustin Poirier. I mean, you might as well be up there like that with Conor McGregor, with Tony Ferguson, and all those elite fighters. So he cannot let that side, or that vulnerable side of him where he doesn't even put up his hands to defend a punch. And he has to have a good gas tank, outlast Dustin Poirier, and maybe mix in some ground game with that, so Dustin Poirier starts running out of energy. Because for a power puncher who likes to have good accuracy, I think taking away his stamina will start to make it hard for him to close in the distance that Dan Hooker is trying to put apart for him. So when we're looking at the 4th or 5th round, if Dan Hooker comes out with a great strategy, I could see him having 2 rounds to 1. Maybe Dustin Poirier lights him up for that second round, but past that 3rd round, the fight is really going to begin, and those long, hard 10-minute championship rounds are going to really wear on these fighters, and that's where we're going to see the grit. We're going to see all the hard work. We're going to see everything these fighters have been building up for. And I think in my prediction that Dustin Poirier is going to get done, and I don't even think it's going to be necessarily close once it gets into those 3 to 5 rounds. It might go to decision, but seeing as what he did in his last fight, I think that Dustin Poirier is going to catch this guy really hard with some hard shots and bust him open even before Paul Felder recovered. And I think he's only going to take half the damage that Paul Felder took to get there, because of his great accuracy and hand-eye coordination is going to win him this fight. But guys, this has been UFC Zilla. Please hit that subscribe button, also hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I make a video, and also stay tuned for my UFC 251 video. That's why I told you to hit the subscribe button, so you could get a notification when that launches, because boy, I have a lot to break down. This is Zilla, sign out guys. Y'all have a nice day.